I don't know about you, but when I'm here recording in the middle of the night, I like some coffee.
Welcome to Thoughtful Thursdays. Today we're going to talk about an anime movie instead of a series. Just because the point of the show is to talk about animes and the ideas behind anime and the psychology behind anime, be it series or movies or maybe OVAs at some point. The movie that I would like to discuss today together with my fellow caster, William, is King of Thorn. I will only talk about the anime because I know that there's a manga that obviously the movie was based on, but manga is not my thing because you can't read it. So I would like for William to start with the manga, just because I want to go back to the origin and I want to hear his thoughts on the matter.
Alright, so just to properly introduce myself, as always, this is your boy, Fearless Billy Nuwanda, the master of coffee. And as you can kind of see, also the master of kitten. So, yeah, so like a little bit of...
You have your cat hat today.
Yeah, I do have my cat hat today, so that definitely helps, you know.
Oh.
It's that...
Yeah, our engineer is once again in the
Yes.
background, so making sure that we're running on time.
There's a hat theme today.
Yes, there is a hat theme today. You know, when we talk seriously about dank anime, we like to have silly hats. So, yeah. But, yeah, like with King of Thorn, it was originally a manga series, very short-lived, that was commissioned. And as a result, it wasn't really enough to necessarily adapt into a full series. So what they ended up going for instead was they adapted it into a movie. And, you know, so keep in mind, folks, as always, there's going to be spoilers throughout the whole thing. If you are spoiler phobic, like our engineer over here, you'll want to go on, like you can go on Funimation, and check out King of Thorn. They have it both in dubbed and subbed varieties for those depending on what your flavor is. And go ahead and go watch it now. It's okay. We'll wait. We can wait in the hour and a half until you get done. Yeah. Have you watched it? Are you good? Okay. Bam. Let's go. Here we go. So, King of Thorn has a lot of really interesting concepts. It's very much in the dystopian sci-fi genre. Like, if you're familiar with the old anime, for a lot of you older school fans, Blue Gender, that is pretty much the same vein as what King of Thorn is. The only difference between the manga and the anime is that the manga has much more fantastical elements to it versus the anime. The anime, of course, because they had to make it into a roughly hour and a half movie, they had to condense down a lot of the storyline. And while they got a lot of the basics of it, there were kind of some specifics that they had to leave out. Specifics that, you know, like, from a critical stance, would have probably made it a better movie, but that's neither here nor there. We're not really getting into whether King of Thorn is a good movie or not. We're really just kind of here to discuss some of the background the content behind it today. So, Delivery Man, like what's kind of a lot of your takes? What are some of the themes that you picked up on when you watched the movie?
There are two themes that I picked up immediately. The first one was the protagonist theme, in my opinion, of the movie, which is the Medusa syndrome, or virus. And the second one was the idea of imagination becoming reality. The idea that dreams can be made into something concrete and real. I liked those ideas very much because in the case of the Medusa virus, towards, I would say, the end of the movie, which I thought was a nice touch to make it towards the end where they actually refer to the Medusa virus as having a psychical or psychological element to it. People who went through trauma either are immune or can manipulate the virus. And somehow they can use it to make dreams into reality. That the virus, according to the show, the movie, comes from space. It comes from a meteorite that hits the Earth, and some people can manipulate Medusa, some others don't, and turn into stone. And I like that idea because another way of looking at turning into stone is becoming immobile. Being in a situation where you're so stumped or so affected by a certain life situation or an incident where you become like stone and you can't move. You can't further your intentions in life.
Yeah, and like it's also kind of reflected in the main protagonist, Kasumi.
Yes.
Because, again, like we're going to kind of go through a little bit of spoiler material, but Kasumi and her sister, Shizuku, end up basically alone by themselves. Because their parents are both lost to the Medusa virus. And Kasumi has a really, really big sister complex to her. Like, she cannot live without her sister. She is absolutely dependent upon her sister. And even to the point to where one of the things it touches upon is that Kasumi tries to kill herself by slitting her wrist. And Shizuku, like, happened to be there and stopped her in time. And this kind of, like, you know, is important because you find out later in the movie, you know, about Kasumi being essentially a construct or an alternative, a copy created by her sister's Medusa powers. Because at one point in the movie, like, in the beginning, you felt like all these people were being taken to the Venus Gate Castle. Because they are supposedly, you know, they have the potential to develop a cure to beat the virus through these people. And Kasumi is chosen, but not her sister. And Kasumi at this point, like, tries to actually kill herself and her sister at the same time. She tries to get them both to jump off the cliff. And when Shizuku rejects that, Kasumi ends up falling to her death, which triggers Shizuku's Medusa powers and ends up, like, not only, like, you know, because, like, Shizuku's wish essentially is that, just the hell with the world, I just want my sister to be alive. So she ends up creating the dystopian environment in which Kasumi and everybody, the remaining survivors, wake up in 48 hours later. So yeah, it's kind of it's a really, a lot of the movie, it kind of deals with Kasumi having to confront, you know, everything leading up to her death, and then also being able to confront the fact that, like, she's stuck in like in the same spot. She's like has been in a deal psychologically where she can't move forward, and it actually takes the events of both the manga and the anime to force herself to finally move on beyond, you know, being overly psychologically dependent upon her sister and overly psychologically dependent upon, you know, being stuck in that one paramount moment. So, yeah.
There are a couple of ideas that I really liked. The first one would be the word itself, alternative. Because the alternative is actually another way of saying solution.
Mm-hmm.
Because an alternative, in the case of the little girl that was first discovered to be able to manipulate Medusa, had the little demon kind of thing that was a protector, and that was a solution to her infantile fears.
Yeah, it really doesn't get hinted on much in the movie, but like, because it's kind of one of those blink it and you miss it kind of moments, but when that creature that leapt out of her back was her imaginary playmate.
Right.
And it doesn't really get hinted upon that much, but in the manga, the how they discover her and everything in the first place is that the playmate shows off his beast side by, like, devouring, like, some livestock and stuff, and they all get scared, and that's why the Russians get involved from that point onward.
I see.
Just to kind of give a little backstory on that, so...
Right. And the reason... The other idea, besides the idea of alternative, which is another way of saying solution, is towards also the end of the movie, one of the characters who's the whole maestro of the cryogenic castle where they're being placed as test subjects. The Russian Ivan Vega, that's the name. So, he explains, he gives an explanation of what Medusa is and what we want to know as viewers or readers of the manga. And what I liked is that he says that Medusa can either be a nightmare or it can be the miracle that humanity needs to evolve to the next step. So it's how you react to a situation is how I interpret it. You can take a traumatic experience, or you can take a problem and think, oh, it's the worst thing that could have happened to me. This is really shitty. Or you can say, oh, holy shit, I can learn a lot about this and move forward from there.
Yeah. And it's kind of, and again, it kind of parallels the journeys that Shizuku and Katsumi have taken in this movie, in that when Katsumi fell to her death, Shizuku immediately reacted in the worst way possible, and that, she reacted so horribly that it created the dystopian environment in the castle, and all the beasts and all the creatures and whatnot that came out of it were born out of her deepest and darkest fears and angers. And again, it's what she's talked about. It's that she went for the worst possible path on that.
Right.
Whereas Kasumi, who was going on that worst possible path, because she ended up becoming an alternative instead, the copy, she ended up all of a sudden diverting and taking the other path.
Right. Which is the solution.
Is the solution, to overcome that, kind of that kind of mental roadblocks that you have in your head. And
another element to the movie is that throughout the movie, and I'm sure throughout the manga too, there's this dialogue between the sisters where they say that they're one side of the same coin.
Yeah.
And one way of interpreting that is for you to see them as one person instead of two sisters.
And that's a very common phenomenon in twins, is that especially like twins that are either born at the same time, that kind of stuff, is that it's not only like they share it's said that a lot of times with twins they actually share a psychic connection with each other. And as a result they take on a lot of the same traits, they have very similar personalities, there are certain divergent differences, but they're pretty much two sides of the same coin.
As opposed to the twins that are born at different times.
Well, there's twins that look alike, and then twins that don't.
He said twins that are born at the same time, as opposed to...
Yeah.
Well, I mean, there is such things as C-section twins.
Yeah, that's right. And what I liked about the show, too, is that the whole the fairy tale aspect to it, which I really find very intriguing. I don't know if you noticed the play with the numbers too, numbers 12 and 13, and 9 and 8.
I wasn't necessarily, because I'm not the greatest at numerology, so let's have you walk everybody through that real quick.
So to me, I I discussed this in a previous episode where we talk about the movie Your Name, and we talked about 8 and 4, which are complete numbers or whole numbers, and then you have the odd numbers, which are 3, 5, 7, etc. And so with whole numbers, there's a completeness. The whole number means that it's symbolizing the wholeness either of an episode in the show or the movie. Like something is going on with the character, where the number itself is telling you that this represents a point in the show where the person has come to a conclusion, and it's going in. This person is going to the next step, like either there's a transition from immaturity to maturity, or from childish behavior to more mature objective points of view. And then the odd numbers, which represent this idea, which symbolize this idea of tension, like there's a problem, there's an obstacle. Mm-hmm. So they in this the King of Thorn uses the fairy tale of Sleeping Beauty, and I think they use it very aptly with the Shizuku and her sister Kasumi, because it's a female, of course, but she goes into the castle. And when she goes into the Medusa, when she uses her Medusa, she falls asleep. Like she more or less dies. Because I don't know how you saw it, but the way I saw it is that the trauma was so intense that she dies. Like there's because she stays in this slumber, and there's when is Shizuku the alternative? Or
no, it's Kasumi.
Kasumi, okay.
Like, the way I interpreted the ending is basically like, if Shizuku was to break free of the Medusa, to return to any sort of a permanent, like, human form, mm-hmm. it would erase Kasumi. So what had to happen is that she had to cast her sister out along with her sister's body so that the alternative could continue to live.
Right.
And what ended up happening is that Kasumi, or not Kasumi, but Shizuku, essentially buried herself underneath the sea. Or the creature that she had become.
I see.
Another really good play on numbers, if you notice, is that, it started off with 7 survivors. And, of course, that's incomplete. So what do you have to do to bring it to completion?
Yeah.
You have to start taking them out one by one. Yeah. And then if you noticed that by the end of the flick, there were only 2 survivors.
That's right.
Which meant finally everything was at a complete number, and that way they could finally end things properly.
And the number 12, and like 48 hours, right? Which is this wholeness that they're striving for. Like that is when she's starting to wake up. Mm-hmm. That's 4 and 8 and etc. And then they throughout the story they tell the fairy tale of Sleeping Beauty, where you have the fairies who are 13, but there isn't a plate for the 13th fairy, so she curses Sleeping Beauty, and it's this 12th, which is again going from odd to whole, which I thought was pretty neat, because it's going from forward to going backwards a little bit, but it's still 12, which is wholeness and stuff like that, which to me gives me the idea that it's okay to looking back is not the same thing as regression, which is not what you want to do if you want to move forward. This idea that the Shizuku is the alternative, or is
no? It's Kasumi.
Kasumi, okay.
Yeah.
So I'm horrible. You might know by now I'm horrible to names. So Kasumi, if we think of Kasumi and Shizuku as being one person instead of being two sisters, then it makes sense that one aspect has to die and go into the sea.
Yeah.
For the alternative, the solution to survive and to become one whole person.
Yeah.
That's how I saw that.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely a way you can take it, too. Because, again, you have to look at Kasumi's journey as being overly dependent upon her sister. The only way to fix Kasumi is you have to delete Shizuku in the process. Especially, it makes sense to sacrifice Shizuku because she's the more noble of the two.
Yeah.
In all aspects. Which is why it's easier to sacrifice her instead of sacrificing Kasumi.
And it also would make sense because she's the traumatized or the really damaged, hurt, very stumped aspect of the personality.
Yeah.
So that side needs to die, symbolically, or go under the sea.
Yeah.
Symbolically for
Kasumi, who's the alternative, but also being the solution to come forth.
Right.
And it's like, and again, it's through the events of the movie that she kind of undergoes what's known as the classic hero's journey throughout the course of the movie. And then she's kind of starts off like as the damaged version of herself when she died, but by the end of it, she's a much more confident and much more capable human being. Even though, like, at the end of it, she still regrets losing her sister to the sea. Mm-hmm. She's ready to, like, move forward finally when she goes off with Tim to go find his parents.
And again, if you look at it from the analytical point of view, where the unconscious has always been interpreted as a body of water, especially the sea, you see that the affected part of the personality goes under the sea, goes into the unconscious, where it's not affecting the conscious part of the character.
Yeah.
Which,
yeah.
And I don't know if this was done on purpose, but you get the impression, like, the Timothy, which is the child that is going through a rough time as well, he's actually escaping in video games because his parents are getting divorced. And I think that's if you take into consideration that Medusa has a psychological aspect to it, you could see that that's what happened to Shizuku and Kasumi's parents as well.
Yeah.
They got divorced and they got into a situation where they became stone. They turned into stone.
Yeah.
Because the divorce was so toxic that they lost communication with their children.
Yeah. And it's also, you can also see it reflected in the mother as well, the one who takes over.
Yes.
I can't remember her name for the life of me. Y'all are going to have to forgive me. But the mother who lost her child and her husband to her own like anger and regression, she ends up making all the characters, all the survivors, even though most of them march to their deaths, they all make their own individual heroes' journeys in which they can reconcile their past and finally at least come to a point of moving forward and essentially like straighten up their karma, if that makes sense.
Yeah. What I thought was interesting, and I don't know how to look at it, because with Marco, which is the hero, like the male hero, he doesn't turn into stone. He just dies out of injuries.
What it is that, again, this is another one of those blink and you miss it kind of deals. he never had the Medusa virus.
Right.
Which is why he never turns to stone. So when he dies, he doesn't turn to stone. He dies essentially just because he got like fucked up throughout the whole movie. Pardon my French. But yeah.
Yeah, no, we can curse here. It's fine. It's fine.
But yeah. Yeah, like it's one of those deals. It's much more pronounced in the manga, but yeah, like they find out at one point. It's a major point of contention that he never had the Medusa virus, and it's another blink and you miss it kind of deal with the manga versus the anime story. Is that there's a reason why he never had the Medusa virus, and it's because he was planted in by the government, the U.S. government. Because he had been in prison for a few years in the manga storyline because he was falsely imprisoned. Because they said that he hacked into the CIA database. And his way out was basically helping the government as an undercover agent to find out what was going on behind Venus Gate.
Right.
And again, a lot of this stuff got stripped out in the anime, but it makes a lot of Marco's motivations make a lot more sense.
Yeah.
And of course, like the other major discrepancy was Alice as well.
Yeah.
But again, you know, like it's kind of like I said, they like the actual King of Thorn manga had a lot more fantastical stuff to it. It's kind of like another really major comparison I can make is Guyver, and that Guyver also started off very much hard sci-fi, very, you know, horror based. But the more that it got into the story, the more it took on more of an epic feel to it, and it changed tone from being like a sci-fi horror type of deal to actually being more parallel to Greek mythology. And again, taking on that more of a hero's journey aspect to it. So yeah.
I think that it's very interesting how... Well, one idea that I really liked, going back to Timothy, is that you see how he uses video games to escape from reality.
Yeah.
And I thought it was cleverly done how, in my opinion, the creator wants to show that a child can recover from a divorce because he is one of the survivors.
Yeah.
And you never see him truly affected by the Medusa virus.
There is one aspect, this is another one of those blink if you miss it kind of deals, but one of the things they didn't really explain too much in the anime was that for everybody that had that biochip implanted, because the whole point of Alice and what Venus Gate was trying to do was to use Medusa to manipulate everybody's brainwaves through their dreams. And if you notice, the kid, Timothy, was constantly calling out the identities of all the monsters. Because all the monsters in there were based off of the video game that he was playing. Which meant that Shizuku, in her moment of when she created this dystopian environment, she was tapping into all of their memories. And so was Alice. So that meant that they tapped into his memories, and that's how they formed the monsters in the castle.
That's right. Yeah. And that was, I think that was a nice element because with his constant talking about the video games, you see the female, the mother figure in the show, like finally losing her patience and saying, "This is not a video game, you know, wake up." And you know, he gets scared, and you see a little more of her story as well, like her trauma.
Yeah.
So it's a nice way of showing his fixation with the video game and her trauma of wanting to save the kid, you know.
But yeah, like the trauma going so hard to wanting to save him that she's willing to smack the crap out of him.
Yes, exactly.
Which, I mean, it also pays into the trope that's really constant in media in general, where the kid's calling stuff right down the middle and like, hey, it's this, And more than likely, the kid probably knew of the best strategy to defeat the monsters, but everybody ignored him anyway and tried to shoot Bane their way out of it, which a lot of the time kind of failed in the very end, as evidenced by the fact that a lot of the characters in the show went down one by one.
Yes. And going along with the idea of the hero's journey and the archetypal figures, the child figure in actually a lot of animes and books and media and all of literature, what the child represents is this uninhibited imagination, which leads to creativity, which leads to an alternative, a solution. Because you're not bogged down with what you're taught in school or what you've, learned, and what they tell you reality is, or what you should really believe, like religion, for example. Yeah,
it's one of those situations where, like, as a kid, you generally have more of a, open wide imagination. And it's not really until you start to close the door and you start to enter in adolescence that everybody starts really hammering into you, this is the really real world. Get ready to do this and that, and get ready to grind out for the rest of your life. It kind of turns into it's basically like when they start getting into you, it's like that, 4 to 5 years of the Verve's Bittersweet Symphony.
Yes.
Over and over again.
Yes, that's right.
Whereas with, when you're a child, you have a much more open imagination, and, as a result, you actually have a lot more of the creativity needed to deal with stuff. But, again, one of the major tropes is that the kids always get ignored because they're kids.
Yes, exactly.
So, and, that was another point. That was a major point that was seen in the anime a lot in this movie as well.
Yeah. I liked that towards the end, Shizuku is the one with the glasses, right?
No, Kasumi.
God damn it. So, they have bracelets that tells them how far they're into the Medusa virus, how far they've been affected by the Medusa virus, and when they get out of the castle, Kasumi grabs the bracelets, takes off the bracelets, and throws them. Actually, very interestingly, into the sea, together with the castle, with the creature that Shizuku was, and had gone into the sea. And so the child says, "What did you do that?" And she's like, "Let's just walk." Which means
let's go find your parents.
Let's go find your parents. Let's go forward. Let's start walking forward. And again, you have the two, like you said, which is the wholeness.
Yeah. And not only that, but it also kind of parallels the concept of Medusa will only turn you to stone if you let it.
Yes.
It's all in your head.
Exactly.
It can, everything that is going on can be changed. You can move forward. You can make that change. You can actually, start anew. You just have to. You just have to will it.
Yes. Take that.
And that's
first
kind
step.
of what symbolically. That's what Kasumi was doing by throwing their bracelets into the sea, because it's just you're not going to turn to stone if you don't want to.
Yeah.
You're only going to turn into stone if you let your fear and your paranoia and everything consume you.
Yes.
So that was actually kind of like the culmination of the hero's journey for the both of them, in that they kind of they're now at the point where they don't have to worry about that stuff anymore. And especially with the fact that they know how Medusa works,
right?
They can go out back into the world and tell everybody, look, we have the ability to evolve and better ourselves. We've been given a gift. It's time that we used it properly. And there are going to be some folks that won't be able to handle it, and that they're going to turn into stone no matter what.
Right.
Because another thing that the anime touches upon a little bit, but more so in the manga, is that the Medusa virus is basically everywhere at this point.
Yeah.
Everybody has Medusa. There's no way around it. There's no cure for it. There's no way to get it out of your system.
Right.
It's something that you're just going to have to be able to deal with. And you can either turn to stone and just,
be immobile.
Or you can move forward and create and be fantastic.
Exactly.
Be fabulous.
Be fabulous.
Yes.
Another, I mean, to reinforce that point, is that I really, really liked how the last thing that she says to Timothy is like, let's go take a walk and look for other people.
Yeah.
Which means let's go out into the world, or we should go into the world and talk to other people, like be in society.
Yeah.
You know, have a healthy interaction with other human beings.
Yeah, and it's I mean, because that very much is the call. That's again that calls back to the finishing of Shizuku's journey, where as she was pretty much like only dependent upon and only would deal with Kasumi. By the end of it, she's much more willing to get herself out there.
That's right. And I think there are two final points that I want to make. The last thing that Marco says is something that I really liked, which was, you know, if you think that it's not worth to keep going on, just hang on, because you might find another person that will make you change your mind, which I thought was pretty neat, because that's a whole idea, you know, finding the soulmate, and it happens, unfortunately, when most of the times when you're not even looking for it. When it seems like it's a lost cause, and then suddenly, like if you're patient enough, if you're willing to hang on for just a little bit, like making a wish, you know, like this faith in a wish.
Yeah, because wishes get referenced a lot in this anime,
right?
Because it's something that's a constant deal between Shizuku and Kasumi, is that Shizuku's constantly telling Kasumi, he's like, look, you know, wishes can come true if we make it.
Right.
And Shizuku's wish was for Kasumi to live.
Right.
And that essentially, by the end of the anime, her wish has been essentially fulfilled. You know?
And Marco's wish was also fulfilled because he had given up on humanity, pretty much, on the way he was living, and it's referenced.
Yes, referenced.
in the very beginning of the anime, where you see this woman falling that is turned into stone. That's Marco's sister. Mm-hmm. And that was his trauma. That was the thing that was in the back of his mind, and together with the framing, you know, and being in jail.
Yeah, which again, the framing part doesn't really get referenced in the anime at all. You really are just led to believe that he's a convict and that he's just he's still brought in as a double agent, mm-hmm. but the extent of it isn't really revealed in the anime as much. So,
I like this idea that when you feel that it's always that moment when you feel that nothing is worth anything, that either you get like random kindness from a stranger that gives you hope for humanity once more, or let's say you're applying for a job and you're about to give up, and then you finally get that one email that, you know, is offering you the dream job. It can be like with all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
But that one moment, that last moment where things finally come to fruition, and that's also how psychological evolution works. Like, it's that point where you're going through hell, and then you have this sudden epiphany. Like, holy shit, now I get it. Like, my issue was this. Yeah. What I really need to do now is this. Yeah. It only happens after you go through a certain hell, which happened to all of our characters.
Yeah, all the characters, like, went through that. Like, they essentially had to go through, like, the Inferno in order to finally get to where they even the score with their karma. They finally have reached that personal inner peace with themselves. A lot of them have to do it through death, but
Right.
at least we have two characters that survive in the end that are
Right.
able to, that are the living ones. Because again, we're talking about 2. It's a whole number. It's complete.
Right, exactly. Which is the like in the end, that's what the anime wants to symbolize, like completion with 2, which again is the whole number, which is the smallest whole number.
Yeah,
which
very
is,
true.
So to conclude, I would say that the main themes, what I paid most close attention to, was the Medusa virus, which symbolizes turning into stone, having a trauma that doesn't let you move forward and is keeping you immobile, and then the idea of the alternative, which is the solution, and the idea at the same time that what's in your mind is what creates reality.
Yeah. And also the fact that, like, you know, to add to that, my end of it is that in order to get to that reality that is fantastical and that is whole, you have to undergo the hero's journey in order to do it.
Exactly.
So yeah, that was a very fruitful talk for tonight. Like I said before, guys, if you guys are interested in King of Thorn, you can check it out on Funimation. They've got it up on dub and sub. And, you know, it's an hour and a half watch. On a critical level, it may not be everybody's cup of tea, but it's got some really interesting concepts to it that I think are worth paying attention to, at least. And on top of that, if anything, it'll give you some inspiration to go check out the manga, which kind of expands greatly upon a lot of the concepts and, you know, delves even into more of the hero's journey and a lot of the themes and a lot of the sacrifices that are made. So, yeah, this is once again your boy, Fearless Billy Nuwanda.
And this is Adan, and again, this podcast is meant as something to initiate discussion and for more analysis. It's not based on critical, like, what is better.
Yeah.
So I hope you had fun. That's the point of this whole podcast. And again, my name is Adan. William.
And just to kind of end things up before we sign off, you know, likes, comments, subscribes are super appreciated. We have content running every day of the week. You can find us either up on the NavyDevilGroup.wordpress.com, or you can look us up on YouTube for Navy Devil Group. We've got stuff running all the time. We got Let's Plays, we got podcasts, we got commentary, we got the whole shebang. We have writing, we have all kinds of stuff that goes on. So
Board games?
Yeah, we have board games even too on weekends. So yeah, like I said, man, thanks for checking us out, and good night and good luck.
Yeah, good luck.